the disclaimer about my accent out of the way. Welcome. In this video, we are going to install the Valvetronic catback exhaust on my GT4RS. I couldn't find any third-party reviews when I was shopping for exhausts about this specific one, so I figured I would make my own and share that with you. You will follow me through the entire install and my struggles, then we'll do a road test, and then I'll share my thoughts after a few months of ownership. This is not a sponsored video, and I am not a pro. I'm just your average car guy, and I bought the exhaust through Valvetronic's website. It's a pretty long video, so use the chapters if you want to jump straight to the road test. Without further ado, let's get started with the unboxing. So the exhaust comes pretty well packaged from Valvetronic. So you've got the over axle pipes and then the muffler. Let me take a quick break to tell you what's actually in the box. So of course you have the two over axle pipes and the muffler, but then on top of that you have a Valvetronic valve controller that I did not end up using. You have a set of titanium exhaust pipes that I will show you later in the video. There are O2 bungs that I will also show you later in the video. And then a little bit of Valvetronic merch, if I recall, a license plate frame, keychain, and other knickknacks like that. So now the first thing to do is to get the car up in the air on the quick jack and then remove the rear wheels so we have access to the over axle pipes. Now the next thing is going to be to remove the oxygen sensors, and the sensors are right here. The first thing we're going to remove, I think I'm going to take off the oxygen sensor, then start working on the muffler, and then finally remove the over axle pipe. The first step here is going to be to unclip the oxygen sensor cable from the body right here, and then I'm going to come with that's a 21 millimeter and unscrew the oxygen sensors. I had to improvise a little bit because the heat shield is in the way, but with a very small extension I was able to actually loosen this enough to remove it. So it's not a 21, it's a 22 millimeter socket that you need, or that kind of stuff. I do recommend, I don't have one, but if you have a 22 millimeter like regular spanner on hand, that would make this easier. I'm probably gonna buy one by the time I put this back on the car. Next up is gonna be removing the diffuser. So you need a T25. Remove 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 screws. Once you've removed the screws, you just have to pull towards the back of the car. It should come. There you go. Okay, we're going under the car now. The next thing to do is going to be to unhook the vacuum lines that control the exhaust valves. The advice that I got from nice folks on the internet was wiggle, 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 wiggle. So that's what we're gonna try. So I'm gonna unclip it from here, and then hopefully I can wiggle it enough. I don't know, I might need both my hands here, or at least my right hand. Let's see. Oh, if I grab it by the metal part, I seem to have an easier time getting it to move. But I suspect I'm gonna need both my hands for this job, so I'm gonna have to drop you for a second. Let's see if I can give you somewhat of a view of what's going on. Alright, yes, with both my hands it was pretty easy, so grab it from the middle tab here, use both your hands and it just pops right out. Okay, so if I understand the situation correctly, but I might be wrong, we're doing this live. The whole exhaust seems to be attached to the body through these two and these two, and then attached to the over axle pipe here. So there's 1, 2, and a third one up there. I'm gonna have to come up with a strategy to reach up there. I'm not sure I'm gonna manage it, so I'm going to drop you off for a second, try to come up with some kind of strategy, and I'll be right back. If that doesn't work, I might have to revert to what the service manual advised to do, which is to remove everything as a unit. We're gonna see. Alright, so change of plans, because I can reach the bottom one with a deep socket like this. I would be able to reach this one with that deep socket and an extension, but the top one, there's no way, I can't find anything that works. Well, like, I can actually put the socket and put the wrench in. So if I can't even remove it, there's no way I'm gonna be able to torque that to spec. So we're gonna try the Porsche way, which is unbolt at the headers over there, and then unbolt all that stuff in the middle, remove everything as one unit. Let's see how that goes. Turns out even that part is kind of tricky. The tricky part is the bolt all the way in the back. You can see there's very little clearance here. So a deep socket hits the chassis here. What I found working for me was using a very thin extension and a shallow socket, so I can wiggle my way through here. You see the shallow socket like just fits under the chassis here. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. It just fits right under the edge here, and this is thin enough that it neither hit into the chassis here or the heat shield for the over axle pipe, and I can reach from there to unscrew everything. So yep, requires some creativity here. Another pro tip, if you don't want to be like me and cover your t-shirt in center lock grease, put a little something over the hub. That's too late for my shirt, but I might save yours. All right, all three are removed. This is what worked for the last one, the ones that's towards the rear of the car, short extension. Otherwise you get into the hub and it's kind of a pain in the ass. And if you're too short, there was not enough room to fit the head of my wrench. I've got the other side loose off camera. I'm gonna try to get this loose as well, without making everything fall down. That was much easier than I expected. All right, so we are free on both sides. Going back under the car, I'm going to remove these two first, then start to loosen this, see if we're moving. If we're moving, I'm gonna have to come back and secure the exhaust from underneath so it doesn't fall on my face. And hopefully that's all there is to it. I'll be back in a minute after I remove these two. Alright, that was too simple. There's a trick to removing these. Actually, if you just try to turn that thing, the whole axle behind it's gonna turn. It's very hard for me to, maybe I can show you. Yeah, so you gotta block this thing here. It's a 19 millimeter. I found it to be a giant pain in the ass to bring a wrench up here. So what I'm doing instead is grab one of these, slide it up over the thingy. This is so much harder to do while recording one-handed than earlier on. All right, so I'm on, and now when I come here, it's gonna rotate and lock against the muffler body, and now I can turn that thing. All right, so well, hanging by a few threads left and right. I don't want to jinx myself, but this looks pretty free to me, so I'm gonna try to figure out a way to put a jack underneath to secure it all, and then finish removing these two. So I grabbed the 2x4, I lowered the car a little bit on the quick jack intermediary position so I don't have to like reach too high with the jack. Grabbed a piece of 2x4, made it fit underneath the muffler, and that's kind of holding it up. So now I'm gonna try to see if I can wiggle my way out of this. Alright, I ran into a snag here where the overaxle pipe, the thing where the OPF are supposed to be on European cars, is bumping into the tray that's under the transmission. So I just removed the zillion fasteners for that thing, and I'm gonna slide it out of the way in order to be able to continue dropping the exhaust. It's always freaking wild to me how many rocks that tray can collect. I probably drove only 50 miles since I've last took it apart, and it's still full of rocks again. Go figure. I didn't off-road, by the way. Alright, so I'll get back to dropping the exhaust. So I'm going really slow, making sure that I don't get stuck on the flange between the headers and the overaxle pipe on either side. The flange can get stuck underneath the chassis, or you can get caught into one of the studs. So it's really like, just if you have somebody to help you, it would be much easier. But by myself, I'm just going super slow. I'll be right back. I cut myself. I need to clean that up. Alright, I'm back. Wear gloves, people. I was doing stupid stuff. Alright. I've had my lunch break and wheeled off the exhaust from underneath the car. So now I'm going to strip the overaxle pipes off from the muffler so I can grab the gaskets that sit in between, and I'll also take off the exhaust tips. Okay, so these are the gaskets you want to install on the new part. I can see that like these ones have already suffered a little bit. My car only has 1800 miles on it. In theory, you're supposed to put new ones, but Porsche charges $70 per gasket and you need 4 of them, so I'm just gonna go ahead and reuse those. If you have 10 or 20,000 miles on your car, you might wanna get new ones anyway. These nuts, the Valvetronic exhaust comes with new hardware for both the over-axle pipe to muffler side and header side to over-axle pipe. I'm gonna leave the studs in the headers, so I'm gonna put new nuts in. Those are single-use nuts. Unfortunately, today is Saturday and my parts shop is closed, so for this install and the first test, I'm gonna put used one in, but first chance I get, I'll put new nuts in. Okay, now that the OPFs, the over-axle pipes are out, I'm going to remove the exhaust tips. I've just noticed that the Vasac one are actually from Acapulco. That's cool. I'm going to reuse them on the Valvetronic exhaust. I've got a heads up from various folks already that they won't likely fit out of, like, it's not going to be plug and play. So I might or might not include adapting the exhaust tips onto the Valvetronic pipe in this video. Hi, that's Hugo. That's the neighborhood cat. He comes and checks out my work every so often. All right, let's remove those tips. Okay, we'll save this for later. So the first thing I'm going to do here is a dry run. So just like loosely throw everything at it without fastening anything, just to get a sense of how everything comes together. I'm really wondering about these things, because like this bolts into the stuff, the vertical axle that was on the original muffler, but I have no clue where that's supposed to, like what that's supposed to plug into, if anything. Taking a look at the over axle pipes, there's a bunch of stuff on there. Leave me a comment if you know what that's meant to be. I have no idea. But the one thing that we gotta take care of is everything is shipped loose. So we're gonna have to tighten those and then remove all the fasteners for dry run. So I'm gonna get started on that. For these things, you're gonna need a 19mm socket. And for this, you're going to need an X size 6. And it doesn't want to come into focus, but you get the idea. Alright, so I've put the over axle pipes down here. That's very easy, just slide them in, there's plenty of space. And now I took a peek of what it's going to take to attach everything together, and I think it's going to be fairly straightforward. So the thing is, I really have no clue what this is meant to be, because there's just like literally nothing in front of it when the muffler is in the car. So I think it's just completely, like, that's the only thing that holds it, and yeah, that's it. See, I'm gonna bring the muffler up, put the gaskets in between. Like, I won't tighten anything, but just get a sense of like how everything fits together, and we'll take it from there. Okay, so this is where I start criticizing Valvetronic a little bit. They give you this kind of hardware to attach everything together. I've sent them an email to ask them about the torque specs for this. All they could tell me is to ask a professional to install my exhaust. Like, thank you, but like, a professional, they're not going to pull out the torque values for these things out of their ass, so I'm gonna use my best judgment to come up with something, and if you know better, leave something in the comments. Here's the downside of the Valvetronic design. It's even worse than the OEM over-axle pipes. Like, there is, even the shape of the over-axle pipe, like, it's borderline impossible to get a socket down there. I think it's more than borderline, it is actually impossible to get a socket. So I'm gonna have to attack this with try to come at it with a wrench, which means I'm not gonna be able to torque that to spec, which sucks. So yeah, I really don't like not being able to torque things to spec, but here's what I ended up doing. I torqued this one to spec because that's the one that I could easily reach. And then I got a feel for how tight that was using a wrench once it was torqued to spec. And I tried my best to replicate that for the two other ones. Really not ideal, but it is what it is. Also the fitment, I wondered, like I started out with a huge gap on that side that I slowly brought in by tightening the things, like slowly, like going around. I wonder if I'm gonna have an exhaust leak here or not. Not too sure, but we shall see. Now everything is in, so I'm gonna tighten everything down, plug back the vacuum lines, and we should be able to start it up and see what it sounds like. I have plugged the vacuum lines back in, torqued both sides. I used 40 Newton meters for these as like a guess. And the last thing is going to be torquing these guys back to spec. That's 44 Newton meters. So that one and that one. And then after that, I'll get back towards the over-axle pipe to reinstall the O2 sensors. All right, so as folks said, the Visac tips, they just float on the Valvetronic exhaust, so I need to figure out a way to craft an adapter. In the meantime, to set everything up, I'm using the enclosed Valvetronic exhaust tips, and it is pretty apparent that I have a leveling issue, whereas on this side, all the gaps are pretty healthy, but on that side, I'm bumping, I'm against the bumper, so this side sits higher than the right side. So I'm gonna loosen things until I get a little bit of play and see if I can fix this. I've got things loose a little bit, and what I think, so here's my plan. So for those of you who are gonna try this at home, definitely don't tighten everything up until you have the exhaust tips back on and you can check that everything is looking good. So what I think the problem is this sits too high to really force the exhaust into position as I'm tightening everything else on. I hope that once, if I can lower this down, so I bought a bunch of washers and I'm gonna install them in between so that it holds the exhaust, this side of the exhaust where I want it. And then I'm gonna tighten everything else down, and hopefully it's gonna still look good. This might come into tension a little bit, like flex a little bit in order to, basically once it's torqued down. We'll see, but the bad news is I'm gonna have to take the whole muffler off in order to put the washers in between these two things. Okay, so the washer approach worked pretty well. It's not perfect, but it's good enough for a first start for sure. I probably need to figure out a way to raise that one back, up a little bit, but now I do have a decent gap on both sides, so I'm not gonna cook the bumper. And like they are pretty well centered left, right. It's really like this one sits still a little bit higher than that one, and I think it's really that one that's too low now. Might be able to, like, I think something needs to be bent a little bit in order to really get it perfect. But that's good enough. So the next step is to put the O2 sensors back on. Once again, Valvetronic, like so. They sent these O2 sensor protector, or whatever they call it, on the sheet of paper, but there's no instructions whatsoever, so I'm gonna assume we need them. Like, yep. And I'm just gonna mount them as I would mount a normal O2 sensor, so using just a tiny bit of anti-seize on the threads. For these O2 spacers, I couldn't really figure out a way to route this cable where like you can still attach to this point and the cable is not in harm's way, like it's kind of sitting where like the wheel is gonna throw a bunch of rocks and stuff. So I don't like that it's just dangling and whatnot, so I'm just gonna get rid of those and put the O2 sensor straight into the over axle pipe. That's pretty much how the OEM setup is, so I'm just gonna try to replicate that and see whether with this location I can like clip the cable properly here. So yeah, that looks much better to me. I just put the O2 sensor straight into the over axle pipe. The cable is mostly tucked away. I can reuse the OEM mounting point. I'm gonna call that good enough. Everything's now tightened. I'm at a point where I'm fairly happy with where the tailpipes sit. The right side one is still a couple millimeters too low, but we're at a point where we're good enough to try and start up the car for the first time. After all, I would say that the install was fairly easy and straightforward, but like most aftermarket exhausts, it was a pain in the ass to set up exactly right, especially given that there's no built-in adjustability whatsoever. So I had to improvise with shims and landed on something that I'm happy with. For the tips, even though Valvetronic's websites say that you can reuse the OEM tips, the outlets were just a little bit too small to be able to clamp the Visax tips on. Valvetronic did own the issue though, and they offered to cover the cost of expanding the exhaust to fit. Sadly, I couldn't find anyone local willing to work on titanium, so what I'm gonna end up doing is fabricate some adapter rings, but that's a story for another day. Interior sound, if you've been in a 4RS, you know that it's almost impossible to really capture what it sounds like in person. So I'm going to narrate with a few examples. Starting with idle, it's not much different than stock inside. It's loud, but it's mostly intake noises. Then in the low 2000 RPM range, the booming that the stock setup does is accentuated by the Valvetronic exhaust, so it's like the booming is even more present. Once again, it's really hard to capture on video, but here's a quick clip. So it's kind of unfortunate because that's where the PDK wants to be if you're just cruising around town, the lower end of the rev range. That said, if you're driving the car in anger, you won't really have to worry about that part of the tachometer. So let me follow up with a clip of just a little bit further up in the rev range, and you can tell that the booming is completely gone, and then from then on it's just music. To date, I have about 1,000 miles on it. Cruises, canyon, track days, and with no issues whatsoever. If that changes, I'll update the description below. Folks pointed out that you can find a very similar exhaust on Alibaba, and indeed it looks very, very similar. I don't know whether it's a copycat or whether it's their actual supplier that's moonlighting. But that said, they have MOQs, and then you would be out of luck if you need any support or warranty. What I can say is that my package came from Pennsylvania, so at least they're not drop shipping. On the topic of warranty, Valvetronic first does not offer returns on what they consider special operation exhausts, but they do provide a 1-year warranty, and they are US based, so you might have more recourse if something really catastrophic was to happen. The warranty itself is a little bit lackluster, as others like Soul, Fabspeed, K-Line all offer a lifetime warranty. Dundon might as well. I couldn't really figure it out from their website. But to be fair, they are also a good step up in price, so you get what you pay for. The Dundon exhaust is more than 3 times as expensive as the Valvetronic setup. The exhaust delivered on what I was looking for, while most of the other options emphasize on the deep bassy tone that comes with the Cayman's longer piping. This is one of the few options that provides the higher pitch tone, which in my head it's what I associate with a high revving engine like the RS, so that's kind of what I was shooting for. The Valvetronic really starts being melodic around 5k RPM, and then it still keeps this crazy metallic crescendo that the RS has between 8 and 9k, to the rev limiter. Here's a comparison between a car running over-axle pipes from Fabspeed and the Valvetronic exhaust to illustrate this difference in tone. And to wrap up this video, here's a car guy favorite, sending it in a tunnel with the windows down. Enjoy the music.